I'm pretty well known in the community for my positivity and allergy to drama, which means that if I'm going after someone, it's because I consider them a danger to the community. With that in mind, let's have a chat about the Wisdom of Odin. Kairate! The evidence in Ocean Keltoy's recent tweet of the complete disregard for COVID as a danger by the Wisdom of Odin in organizing gatherings, and the rather flimsy excuses being given for hosting what could very well turn into a super spreader event left a bad taste in my mouth. And after I retweeted it to let my own followers know what was going on, I received some rather concerning screenshots from a few members of his Discord server showing a complete lack of concern for the virus and its danger. Because apparently, this wasn't just one event. There are events being organized all through the East Coast and one in the UK. I had to speak up on my channel at that point, because what he's doing is dangerous. I'm hoping that Wisdom of Odin, or that's a bit long. What about Woo? Can I call you Woo? I'm hoping Woo is just ignorant of the dangers of the disease and is inadvertently being irresponsible because he's surrounded by misinformation and lies in his home state. It doesn't look that way with the evidence, but let's be charitable for now. Before I get to the tea, I'd like to give you some background on why this upset me specifically so much. Those of you who have watched the Xenia Coalition Monday nights probably won't be surprised to learn that my husband and I got COVID back in March and April, respectively. He brought it home when an outbreak started at his job, and though the company swore they'd done a special cleaning, he and several in his work area still got sick. My husband ended up in the hospital twice because we couldn't control his fever. It was over 104, and we couldn't control it with medication. The second time, I had a mental breakdown talking to my mother-in-law about who would have to make medical decisions for him, as the doctors were concerned that his oxygen counts were low enough they might have to intubate him. The choice fell on me. Did I mention that the hospital was so crowded there were patients in some of the triage rooms and they only had one open? We also couldn't visit him while he was in there. If you have a loved one, put yourself in my shoes there for a moment. You're sick and getting sicker by the day, and the love of your life is laying in a hospital bed. You can't see them. You get a call from a doctor saying that they might need to be intubated and have a long discussion with their parents about who has to make medical decisions for them if they can't wake up to choose for themselves. Do you want to put your loved ones at risk like that? Could you make the choice to host gatherings that could potentially force you or others into that situation? Keep in mind, hospitals now are even more crowded than they were then with the post-Thanksgiving viral surge. Your loved one might not even get in. The doctors ended up deciding that a 94% oxygen count wasn't quite low enough for how few beds the hospital had, and sent him home on a regimen of acetaminophen and ibuprofen alternated with each other every 3 hours to keep his fever down. I had to stay up through the night to make sure that I got him his medication so that he didn't overheat while he was sleeping. In fact, you can go back through my Twitter and find where I live tweeted a timeline of both of our symptoms because my disease looked radically different. I had no fever. But within 3 days, I developed severe glass lung pneumonia. I also almost completely lost my sense of smell and thereby most of what I could taste. You know how fruit juice tastes like fruit? It just tasted like sweet and sour mixed. There was no flavor for over 2 weeks. As my lungs got worse, I also got these fizzing waves of pain that would wake me up at night sobbing, which at the time doctors couldn't explain but now seems to be related to folks with autoimmune conditions contracting the disease. Remember, you or your loved ones might have one of these conditions, and because the American healthcare system is crap, you might not know you have it. One day, that pain concentrated in my right leg, and it was my turn to head to the hospital on the recommendation of a nurse who called me daily to monitor me as a high-risk patient. They thought I had clots, because the virus attacks the ACE2 receptor. COVID-19 is known to attack the immune system and cause them. Having been stuck in bed for almost 2 weeks at that point, I was high risk. Thank every one of the gods they didn't find one, though my blood pressure was really low and my oxygen content was also near low enough for intubation. They gave me steroids to help open up my lungs and sent me home as well, with specific instructions to my partners to monitor me for certain signs that I wasn't getting enough air. It took both of us over a month to fully recover. Well, maybe not fully. I'm still trying to make up the muscle loss that I had from being stuck in bed over a month straight, and I've got lost hair from what some folks call COVID long haul syndrome, where months later hair falls out in clumps for no reason. Supposedly it'll come back. I'm hoping so, but we don't know. There's also long-term, potentially permanent damage to my heart and lungs, and my nerve damage that I already had got significantly worse. In other words, COVID-19 is not the flu, and treating it like it is could get you and your loved ones killed. My husband and I are both under 40. I'm not even 30 yet. Neither of us should have been that sick, and yet both of us have fought off the flu many times. Oh, and our other partner and boarder, which our boarder has a deadly liver and blood disease? It's a damn good thing my state had laws about people in houses that are infected not leaving, because neither of them ever developed symptoms. They easily could have left the house and spread it to other people unaware of the risk because they never felt sick. Remember, asymptomatic people can spread this virus. Which is why, given the current numbers skyrocketing and hitting their highest point now after Thanksgiving, I can't believe that good old Woo here is hosting a potential super spreader event all over the country. What is a super spreader event, you ask? My buddy Nervardia, a science communicator and a damn good friend, is here to tell you all about it.
Thank you, Aliakai, for having me on. For those of you who don't know me, I am a bit of a science nerd and I'm a bit of a science communicator, and it is also hot and sweaty in the land down under, hence the face. I apologise for the melting. Anyway, Aliakai has asked me to explain what a super spreader event is, and I just wanted to do a couple of definitions and talk a little bit what the difference between a super spreader event is and what a super spreader is. So, a super spreader is a person who, for some reason or other, tends to spread a disease faster and more effectively than most other people. I also want to talk about something called the basic reproduction number, which you might know as the R0 or the R0 factor. So basically what it is just the number of people that a person who is infected with a infectious disease is likely to spread to another person. For example, a disease such as measles has an R0 or an R0 factor of about 16 to 18. What that means is that if you are infected with measles and you are in a naive population, meaning a population that has no antibodies to the measles disease, you are likely to spread measles to 16 to 18 people. COVID-19, depending where you get your sources from, is usually around about 1 to 3. In regards to R0, the higher the number, the more a disease is likely to go into pandemic or massive proportions without some form of vaccination. Again, with measles, the R0 value is 16 to 18, meaning that one person can spread it to 16 to 18 people, and then one of those 16 to 18 people who've been infected will spread it to an estimated 16 to 18 other people, and so on and so forth. And the growth, of course, is exponential. That's why things like super spreader events are really, really, really dangerous. R0 and R0, however, are not exactly, how would I say, perfect numbers, because diseases spread in different ways, and it depends not just on a person's ability to spread the disease, but it also depends on the person's environmental surroundings. COVID-19 is spread through respiratory droplets such as coughing, sneezing, just even singing and speaking spreads around your mucus and goopiness and bleh all over the place. For example, a super spreader event for would be gatherings amongst a group of people indoors. A super spreader event for a disease that is spread by water, for example, contaminated water, such as polio, would be a group of people going for a swim together in a shallow pool or something like that, and they're consuming the same water that that person who is infected with polio would be in. So a super spreader event for COVID-19 would be a group of people, even up to 5 or 6 people, in a house without masks, without any precautions being taken. And the reason why we're saying indoors is really, really important is because that the droplets that are expressed through speaking, talking, singing, coughing, even just sharing drinks, they're not spread around like you would outdoors. So a super spreader event indoors will have a lower number of people required if one person is sick, or every single person in that particular area will become sick. However, if 5 or 10 people were outside and one person was sick, but everyone took 1.5 meters distance, they were outside, you didn't share anything, and you wore your mask, the chances of this person with this disease to spread it to other people in the group is practically null. So that's the difference between a super spreader and a super spreader event. And the reason why super spreader events are really, really scary is because something like COVID-19, which has an R0 value of approximately 1 to 3, it becomes exponential. One person will spread it to 2 or 3, or maybe the entire congregation, and every single person in that group that's been infected are expected to spread it to 1 to 2 or 3 other people. And if that person goes to another ritual, then they will probably spread it to every single person. And then again, exponential growth, which is why whenever there's an epidemic, you have to get onto the disease as soon as possible. So I hope that helps. I hope that clears things up. And don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn.
Thank you, Nervardia. Go check out her channel sometime. She makes difficult scientific concepts easier to understand, and her video on how to pick a journal for scientific research is especially good. A small gathering of 5 to 15 people can easily spiral out of control in terms of infection, especially if folks are flying in from all over the country to attend, as was implied in some of the screenshots received after my repost and some of the ones posted on the original Twitter thread. As you can see here, several of these gatherings have already happened, and more are already scheduled in the future. Also, trigger warning on both the Twitter thread and what I'm about to discuss involving self-harm. This is some pretty heavy stuff. The posts seen here clearly imply that COVID is not a concern for Wu, as he doesn't think it's that bad. You know what, Wu, let's talk personally for a bit. As one leader in the pagan community to another, even if your platform is a bit larger than mine and you lead a community of Norse pagans and I Hellenists, I hope that this is just born out of ignorance, because nothing I'm seeing here implies that social distancing is a concern at these gatherings, especially considering it appears to be some kind of camping trip where social distancing might be difficult. Now, I know you've done videos from gatherings in the past, and they don't really look like you give much concern to distancing then either, especially since the pandemic started. I'll give some grace on that. We didn't know how many people were going to get sick back in June, and the Cheeto-in-Chief didn't make that easier on anyone. But your justifications here in this post do not make sense to me. As someone who has made multiple attempts on my own life over the years, 2 of which were before I turned 18 and 1 at 21, having people physically around me didn't help depression all that much. I was messed up because of abuse, and I had friends who loved me, family who still cared about me. I wasn't alone, and nothing dissuaded me. Those decisions were made in the dark, when no one was around, whether I'd seen someone that day or not. At the end of the day, a gathering isn't going to make or break that choice, because when they get back home, all the problems that led up to those feelings are still there. I've also been more social since the pandemic started than I ever was before, because so many people were driven online to get their social needs met. Why do you need an in-person camping trip when Discord, Skype, Zoom, and other online platforms exist that can connect people, even those without the money to fly across the country to meet you together? My buddies Ocean Keltoy and Wolf the Red were even kind enough to let me host a Hellenic ritual in their Discord server a few months back, so I could bring my own community together with theirs. That's closer to the ideal right now, given how many of us in the pagan community got after the Christians suing their states over the right to go to church and get each other sick. We're better than that, right? Right? Because if one of those patrons shows up that has a condition that they don't know about because healthcare in this country is utter shit and dies, you, good sir, have blood on your hands. You organize that gathering. It takes one, as Nervardia pointed out, to spread it to all of you in short order. And let's face it, y'all probably weren't wearing masks or distancing if what you said in your Discord server was anything to go by. Georgia and Kentucky, where you held 2 of those gatherings, are already pushed to capacity in terms of hospital beds, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Spectrum News respectively. There might not be beds for the people if they get sick because of you. Think about that. I'm hoping it's just ignorance on your part. I really am. Because otherwise, it's blatant irresponsibility and gambling with the lives of your followers. And as content creators, we both know how much we can influence those who follow us, don't we? Ignorance or no, you're still responsible if your followers get sick and die because of your gathering. There's no question about that. You say you want to gather the folk, which, for the reasons in the video that just popped up in the iCard above, is not language I would use, but it is something you often repeat. You want to build a community. You want people to not feel alone. I understand that. In fact, I have a Discord community with just under 400 people at time of recording from across various pagan faiths, and some atheist allies, and even a few Christians scattered here and there. What confuses me most about this motivation regarding you, though, my dear Wu, is that when I went looking for the server those shots came from for context, I discovered that your community is locked behind a paywall. The minimum that I could pay to get in is a commitment of $5 a month, which might not seem like a lot until you realize how strapped for cash most pagans are. This is bizarre to me, as I've managed to build my interfaith community without a single cent contributed by anyone who didn't volunteer. My patrons get a secret area in my server where they can talk to me outside of the noise of the main chats, and we have filtering devices like the Gatehouse to keep away unsavoring folks who might hurt our community. If you want to build a community, why lock the whole thing behind a paywall like that? Unless the only, folk you want to gather are those with money that you can wring out of them. I'd never assumed such a thing, but between you and me, woo old buddy, it's not a good look. Leveraging mental illness and personal choice the way you did in the excuse post is disgusting. If you're that concerned about suicide in community, locking your community behind a paywall and using the excuse of, well, that's the best reward from my Patreon, ain't it, chief? Neither is hosting in-person gatherings all over the country that could potentially put all or some of your followers at risk. I hope it's just ignorance, for the sake of you and those who follow you. Because from where I'm sitting, you're starting to look like what I hate most about Christianity, but wearing a pagan mask. Thank you all for sticking through that. If you're new here, infect the subscribe button and wrap the like in a mask. Drop down into the comments and let me know how you feel about all these gatherings. Or just tell me that I'm being a hater for attacking a figurehead in the Norse Pagan community if that's your speed. Special thanks to GaelicNox for the channel art as always. Links are in the description below to their website and Twitter. And special thanks to my patrons. I didn't charge you all for this because this one was personal, but I'm grateful for all you do for the rest of my content, and this channel wouldn't exist without you. Premiere, JSTOR, and the resources that I use for my channel wouldn't happen without you, though anyone can access my Discord server regardless of if they give me money or not, and I'm glad that you are all fine with that. May the cycle of reciprocity between us ever be positive. And remember, faith ain't fear.